A C-130H Hercules 4 engines, 42 years old, sits at the end of a 1,199-meter jungle airstrip near the border with Peru and Ecuador. 113 soldiers from the National Army of Colombia climb aboard. 2 police officers, 11 crew, 126 people total. The mission is a routine troop transfer. Under an hour of flight time, the loadmaster weighed every occupant, recorded the numbers, stowed the forms on board. At 9:50 a.m., the aircraft rolls. The C-130H needs roughly 1,000 meters to lift off at this weight. Caucaia's runway gives them 1,199. That's a 199-meter margin. On paper, it works. But at the end of runway 30 past the threshold, past the safety zone, there are trees. Not small trees. Amazon canopy, 30, 40 feet tall. And they are close enough to the flight path that investigators had already noted them. The aircraft rotates, it lifts off. 4 seconds later, the right wing clips the first tree. What happens next is documented in the flight data recorder. The inboard right engine ingests plant material on first impact. Then the fuselage hits the second tree. Then both left propellers hit the third. Both left engines lose power simultaneously. The aircraft rolls 29 degrees to the left. The right engines are still producing full thrust, pushing the nose further into the roll. At that bank angle, with that power asymmetry, at that altitude, there is no recovery. The C-130 drops into the jungle 1.5 kilometers from the runway. It hits the ground and explodes. Ammunition stored in the cargo hold begins detonating. Rescue crews cannot reach the site for hours. The jungle is too dense, the fire too hot, the rounds keep cooking off. Indigenous rangers were first on scene on foot, cutting through rainforest, no heavy equipment. Soldiers who survived the impact died waiting for help that could not get through. Of 126 people on board, 69 never make it out. 57 survive with injuries. 14 of them critical. Here is what the investigation found. The trees at the end of runway 30 were not a surprise. They were a known obstacle, catalogued, documented. Every aircraft that took off from runway 30 cleared those trees by a margin that shrank every time the load got heavier. The preliminary report specifically recommended their removal after the crash. That recommendation should have been a restriction before it. The runway sits at 600 feet elevation, surrounded by Amazon rainforest. It is short for a loaded C-130 by military transport standards. There is almost no margin at the threshold, and the threshold has trees. Every pilot who flew out of Caucaia knew this. Ground crews knew this. The Air Force knew this. Nobody ordered the trees cut. Nobody restricted the aircraft type. Nobody changed anything, because nothing had gone wrong yet. And in aviation, nothing going wrong is often mistaken for nothing being wrong. Now, here is where it gets darker. The C-130H has a maximum takeoff weight of 139,000 pounds. The flight data recorder shows the estimated weight that morning, 133,000 pounds. Within limits, barely. A 6,000-pound margin on a jungle strip with obstacles at the threshold and Amazon heat reducing engine efficiency. But the loadmaster's weight forms were destroyed in the post-crash fire. The only hard record of exactly how much was on that plane no longer exists. Investigators cannot definitively confirm or deny overload. The evidence burned with the aircraft. 113 soldiers in full combat gear, weapons, ammunition, crew equipment, cargo. The number on paper says within limits. The paper is ash. This is what a C-130 engine does when it ingests a tree at rotation speed. The T-56 turboprop pulls air through a 13-foot propeller arc at takeoff power. Anything entering the intake hits the compressor blades at near supersonic speed. The blades deform. Fragments enter the combustion chamber. Power drops instantly, not gradually. Instantly. On the left side, both engines simultaneously, the thrust asymmetry becomes catastrophic. The right side is still producing full power, the left side is gone. The aircraft yaws and rolls, left with nothing to stop it. A C-130 can fly on 2 engines under certain conditions, but not at 133,000 pounds. Not at 600 feet elevation, where the air is thinner and lift margins shrink. Not 4 seconds after liftoff, with 29 degrees of bank already developing, and jungle floor 80 feet below. The crew had no time. The physics gave them none. From tree strike to impact less than 8 seconds. The aircraft itself was part of the problem long before that morning. Fact: 1016 was built in 1984. It flew for the United States military for decades. Then, the US decommissioned its surplus, no longer needed, and donated it to Colombia in 2020 under the Excess Defense Articles program. Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, called it a crappy gift, said it cost more to maintain than to replace. The former president fired back, said the aircraft was airworthy, said maintenance protocols were followed before delivery. Both argued on social media while 69 families waited for remains to be flown to Bogotá for forensic identification. And while they argued on April 9, 2 weeks after the crash, the Colombian Air Force quietly confirmed FAC 1016 had no valid insurance at the time of the accident. The Air Force had warned of this in January 2026. A 258 billion peso shortfall in coverage across the entire fleet. That is not a rounding error. That is the entire fleet uninsured, uninspected, flying anyway. The warning was filed, noted, passed up the chain. The planes kept flying. Since 2022, Colombia's military had experienced 6 prior aviation accidents. 6 times the system absorbed the damage. 6 times, nothing fundamentally changed. FAC 1016 was warning number 7. 3 things could have broken this chain. Any one of them saves those 69 lives. 1. Cut the trees. A crew with chainsaws in 1 week would have bought back hundreds of feet of margin. Trees that tall, that close to the threshold, on a military airstrip, should never have been standing in the first place. The recommendation existed, the equipment existed, the order never came. 2. Weight restriction at Caucaia. A standing limit, no more than 120,000 pounds out of this strip, gives the aircraft room to absorb a failure at the threshold. At 133,000 pounds on a short jungle runway with obstacles, there is no room for anything to go wrong. No one issued the restriction. 3. Ground the uninsured aircraft. When the government is warned in January that its fleet has no valid coverage, that is not a paperwork problem. That is a signal that maintenance schedules, inspection records, and airworthiness documentation are all falling through the same cracks. No one grounded them. 69 people died inside a window that 3 administrative decisions could have closed, not engineering breakthroughs. Not new aircraft. 3 decisions, none of them made. Investigators have now recommended that fixed-wing takeoffs from runway 30 at Caucaia be suspended until the trees are removed. The trees are still there. No machinery has been deployed. No timeline has been announced. The airstrip remains open. Colombia, aging military fleet, continues to operate on budgets that cannot cover insurance, let alone replacement. The next C-130 in that fleet is not newer, it is not safer. It has the same airframe hours, the same maintenance gaps, the same jungle strips, with the same obstacles, at the same thresholds. It is one mission away from the same chain. 69 soldiers loaded onto that plane, believing the system had checked everything that mattered. The system had checked nothing. If this video opened your eyes, share it. One share puts this in front of someone who needs to see it. Subscribe to Hidden Forces. Every video exists to show you the systems designed to hide from you. Hidden Forces. Every disaster has one. The next crash is already being built, one ignored warning at a time.